I work at West Suburban Senior Services, which is in Bellwood, and it's a senior center. So the drop-in refers to folks can drop in during the day to take part in the activities of the senior center. It's like a drop-in center, which is a little bit different than the model folks around here are used to, where there's residents and things like that. So it's a little different, and really a good community organization that does a lot, for people, older adults coming in to have a lunch, do activities during the day, kind of brain games to keep your cognitive, active, and that's what the drop-in center refers to. But SAGE is Services and Advocacy for LGBT Elders, and that's a national organization that's been around since the 70s, and there's affiliates across the country. And we are just the second in Illinois. So there's a center on Halstead that has a SAGE affiliate, and we at West Suburban have a SAGE affiliate, which means that we host regular programming for LGBT older adults. We do advocacy work, like around issues that affect LGBT older adults, and just in general, our resource in the community for LGBT older adults.
I had also worked a little bit with the center on Halstead, which is in the city of Chicago, not so far from here. And most of the folks that go to Eric's program now in Bellwood, before it existed, would travel like 2 hours plus to come here because there isn't really anywhere for them to go. So the creation of the SAGE program in Bellwood was kind of like huge for them, because then they could be in the suburbs, they could be in their own space, they can have like the resources and things come to them, and they wouldn't have to travel for it. Right,
so when we first started it, there was hardly anything in the western suburbs, for LGBT older adults. I was just out of graduate school with my master's degree in social work, ready to change the world and do all these things. I'm gay myself, and so I was interested in LGBT issues and looking around to see what we could do at West Suburban, and there was literally nothing going on, it's like she said, the other folks were driving, taking a bus and a hike and a train to the center on Halstead. So when they found out that we would offer programming in the western suburbs closer to home, they really took to it, and it kind of took off right away with a small group at first of like 6 or 7 folks. Within the first year, there was like 100 people who had come through the program. So there was really a need that I think the program, met.
One of the participants actually jokes that when Eric came to first start it, that someone had told you along the way of, well, good luck, but there are no gay people in the suburbs. And he loves to joke that well, we're here, and obviously that's not a thing. You build it and we will come. Here we are.
I always cry when I talk about this, but I'll try not to. We went on the trolley in the Pride Parade, Chicago Pride Parade one time with our SAGE group, and just to see those folks in the Pride Parade receiving the love of tens of thousands of people as they went along the parade route. These people who had for years hid who they were, got used to hiding who they were, and navigating this world where they weren't always supported, to see them get unconditional love and to find a place for themselves, it just fills my heart and makes all the work worthwhile.
Yeah, I think when the DEI committee first started, we quickly realized how much falls under the umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's really a lot, and so we kind of took a step back after having a couple meetings and talking as a group, that we realized that we wanted to be sensitive to what were the needs at CMSS across the system, because CMSS, it's in and of itself is pretty huge, and we as community members didn't want to speak for what the needs are for folks that we didn't have access to, specifically for direct service staff and for residents that aren't able to participate in our committee meetings. We wanted to provide them with a voice. So that's when we brought Jacqueline in to be a neutral, third-party facilitator, so that we as a committee then had data that we could look at and say, well, here's what the needs are. What do we need to do now as a committee to make sure that these things happen?
Most recently, for the last year, I've had the honor of partnering with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at CMSS to really get an idea of what's happening for residents, for clinical staff, and for non-clinical staff. CMSS was on board 100% to really understand how to make life better for everyone that works for CMSS and lives in their homes. So that process took some time. We held 3 focus groups. One group was resident focused, one was focused on clinical staff, and then another on non-clinical staff. I was able to report back to the board of directors, to the leadership, and to the committee that is planning the strategic plan. And throughout, I just was so impressed, because oftentimes when we're talking about issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's a natural defensiveness, right? We're all in the helping professions. We care about people and we want to do a good job. And diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and asking people about their experience can bring to light difficult situations. Throughout the whole organization, including and up to Bill Lowe, the ED, everyone has been on board and has been curious, had an open, non-defensive position, and really seemed to be trying to create that culture of belonging that so many people value about CMSS. Culture change takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think that CMSS is a great example of what can happen when you have a sustained eye on equity and inclusion. It's not just a one and done. And many of the organizations I've worked with go through a training and then think that they are providing affirming services. Those are not the benchmarks. One training does not make the difference between what somebody's going to experience within your walls. So what we look for, and I'm not saying this on behalf of SAGE, I'm saying this as an LGBTQ serving provider that vets nursing homes and skilled care and assisted living facilities all the time. What I look for is, do they hire LGBTQ people? Are there LGBTQ people in leadership? Is there programming that is relevant to gay and trans elders? Do they have policies and procedures that speak about the needs LGBTQ people have? So it's very comprehensive. I also look to see who they partner with, because nobody's expected to be an expert. I've been working with my communities for a very long time, and I learn something new every single day. So it's about, are you partnering with LGBTQ plus organizations, hiring consultants that are aware and inclusive? And CMSS does all of those things. And I've seen that commitment over time. So I look forward to seeing what you all do in the future. I know that the wider community is benefiting greatly from having the stability of CMSS in the Andersonville area for so long, and this deep commitment to increasing equity and justice in senior spaces.
For me, the good thing that came out of it was the positives as well. You know, we think of it almost as there's going to be, you know, some criticisms and things of the organization, which there were, but there was also a lot of good. Talking about that there's a family vibe at the organization, there's you know, a culture of belonging almost, where there's a broad variety of people from different countries speaking different languages, all under one roof, working as a team. So the positives that came out of it, I think, gave us a sense of the strengths that we had to build on, and that's a good place to be starting from.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think too, when I came in with the organization, part of what I was looking at in my area of focus is LGBT older adults. And so I was like happily surprised that the focus groups had a lot of positive feedback regarding LGBT efforts and things at CMSS. I thought that there would be a little bit more pushback, and it seemed like people saw that the organization had been making efforts and were, you know, supportive of that. So
some of the things that initially came out, as I mentioned, were like that there was already this culture of belonging that exists at CMSS. So we kind of took that concept and said, how can we expand on that? How can we really make that part of the, you know, the infrastructure of the organization? So I think there's things happening where there will be like a welcoming committee for new employees. We're kind of taking a gauge of all the different languages that are spoke at CMSS and how we can celebrate that and make that a strength. And so what we kind of see coming from some of these things are, you when you walk in the building, you see who we are, you see how diverse we are and the strength that is in that diversity, and you see yourself represented in the marketing campaigns, in the staffing and everything. So even an LGBT older adult who walks in the door is going to see signs that they are welcome here, that there's training in place for the staff to work with LGBT older adults in a culturally competent way. So all of these things I think are just at the infancy really, like as far as this committee, but they're going to blossom in the next few years, and I think that's only going to get more exciting as people see that it's real. It's not just talk. There's a lot of talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and but I think people really need to see the rubber hitting the road and things actually changing, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think we wanted to be intentional about the initiatives, and we didn't want to just put like a rainbow flag on the website and call it a day. We wanted to make sure that we were standing by the things that, what's the vision and what's the culture at CMSS, and we need to like live that.
There's this amazing virtual reality training, I don't know if you're familiar with, called Embodied Labs, right?
Yeah.
And you actually put on a headset and you literally embody the persona of a person who is interacting with like a aging provider. So like there's one that's with a trans person kind of interacting with medical providers. There's one with LGBT older adults, interacting with programming. There's other ones. Help me remember. Memory care, someone suffering from dementia or cognitive issues, how they perceive things like when you're in their body. So I think that training is really groundbreaking, and we have the internet trainings where you just take the training and take the test and you move on. But I think we've discovered obviously that people react much more to people in front of them sharing their experiences and being a real human being and feeling what they've been through. We're hopeful that we can expand the use of that and get people doing that. But there's also other trainings happening. Katie has done the GOLD program, which we can hopefully touch on a little bit.
Yeah, so the GOLD program stands for GLBT plus older adults leading initiatives to drive change, GOLD. And it has two sort of initiatives within it. One is creating an LGBT plus advisory council, and it's going to be with mostly SAGE members from the Bellwood program that they're going to oversee intake forms, policies, initiatives at CMSS as a whole, where now we can have something more formalized to kind of check in with them and say, hey, does this speak to you? Does this affirm your identity? Let's look at our intake forms. Does it ask about sexual orientation? Are we asking gender identity? There's finally a space that we can look at those things. And the other part of the GOLD program is storytelling events. We did our first storytelling event last month, and it went really well, where we were able to provide LGBT education and then had 3 storytellers from the SAGE West Suburban program tell really personal stories and we had great feedback from everybody that was able to participate, where they felt like they were able to understand the life and experience of LGBT older adults in a way that they hadn't before. So
the GOLD program is pretty amazing, and it originated because we really wanted CMSS to be a space where people can feel free to come out, feel free to tell you who they are so that you can best meet their needs. And so I think that is really what it's all about. And if we can see movement in that, see things in the people disclosing more, feeling more comfortable disclosing, us being able to meet their needs in a way that we weren't able to before because we know exactly what they're going through, that's big to me. The GOLD program, I think, is something that could be replicated in other organizations and other places, and so if we can make it, take off and be successful with it here, I think that it's a model for other organizations to look at and think about how they can best, train their staff and be in a space where everyone feels welcome in our organization. So, I'm really proud to work with Katie on that, and glad that she was able to kind of flesh out the real needs that we saw here and make a program that spoke directly to it. So that's exciting.
So SAGE, which we already sort of talked about, and the Human Rights Campaign, or HRC, kind of joined forces, And to my understanding, and so they created this long-term care quality index, which is new in the space, where it is sort of an assessment for long-term care facilities to do self-assessments of their own policies and practices and forms to say, and then it kind of gives them a determination of how affirming and friendly they are for LGBT older adults that were to go in those settings. And so all of our qualifying facilities at CMSS have made the commitment to make the pledge of doing those self-assessments and then getting the resources to make improvements if there are any that are found. So we've already made the commitment and the pledge, which is actually pretty huge. There's a map on the website of the Long-Term Care Quality Index. You can see everybody that has made that pledge. And there really are not that many in Illinois, so we're kind of paving the way.
Being a not-for-profit space, you know, there is always that struggle for funding, and that's something that West Suburban has, you know, struggled with at times, and we are just now kind of aligning with CMSS and getting our marketing aligned a little bit better and putting our name out there better. But I think I would just ask that they see us, see what we're doing, take a look at, you know, the work that we're doing and the impact that it's having on folks, and how they could support it. You know, there's different ways, different programs to donate to, different ways to support us, but any support kind of really helps and goes towards, you know, doing all these things that we've talked about.
Yeah, well, and the more resources and support that there is, the more that we can kind of expand and build on those efforts. From my understanding, I think Bellwood previously had lunch programs and you were able to provide lunches, and there were other things that may not be able to continue now unless we have more support from you viewers, you know.
I just want to thank everyone who's been part of the DEI initiative so far, and again invite everyone that wants to be part of it to join us, and I'm excited for the future at CMSS.